It's a familiar sight in Hong Kong. Scenes of violence and unrest have been going on for months.
There are no black and whites in this whole story here.
What started as a bid to quash a controversial extradition bill has now morphed into a pro-democracy movement over fears Beijing is breaking its promise of one country, two systems, agreed to after the 1997 handover. But how the unrest is being perceived in Hong Kong and around the world depends on who you're listening to.
You have this whole evil Beijing communist regime, Hong Kong people struggling, for their freedoms and their rights, and them being brutalized and them being repressed. You have that kind of narrative. At the same time, from the Chinese side, the mainland Chinese side, you have this rioters and terrorists.
You look at the coverage after a weekend and you will see two entirely different worlds, parallel universes.
Chinese state media is fighting a relentless campaign to shape the narrative in its favour. And in Hong Kong, media freedom is under increasing threat, as its own journalists and media companies face mounting pressures. The competing narratives have sown distrust and exposed the difficulties Beijing will face trying to integrate Hong Kong as one China amid a battle between two competing media ideologies.
How do you feel about Chinese media, the mainland media?
One word, sucks. The government controls the media. Every media in China is controlled by the government. Even part of them in Hong Kong, they also control it.
There are two sides. One is like supporting for the democracy, supporting for the citizens. One are supporting the government. And I tend to believe the ones who believe in the citizens.
Protesters are angry about the way Chinese state media has portrayed them as rioters and even terrorists, as well as controversially using a famous Holocaust poem to compare protesters to Nazis. But distrust has also fueled paranoia. In one now infamous incident, a journalist from the mainland was assaulted and tied up by protesters who accused him of being a spy.
It can be very difficult because as well as, battling with the misinformation from state media, there is a lot of fake news or misinformation or whatever you want to call it, floating around social media. The vast majority of Hong Kongers at the moment are turning to Telegram groups and live feeds, possibly because of just the level of distrust in institutions at the moment in the city.
Neither the Global Times or the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded to the ABC's requests for comment. The unrest has also thrust Hong Kong's media into the spotlight. In 2002, Hong Kong was ranked number 18 in the world for press freedom, but that score has steadily eroded, with the city now ranking number 73. The decline has coincided with Beijing's attempt to challenge democratic freedoms in Hong Kong.
Just over the last 10 years or so, we've seen attacks on journalists, commercial boycotts of pro-democracy newspapers. We've seen the rise of self-censorship in newsrooms, which can be a conscious or unconscious process. And a lot of that is due to the ownership issues, whereby newspapers are either outright owned by the Communist Party, owned by Chinese conglomerates, or by those with business interests in the mainland.
The South China Morning Post is arguably Hong Kong's most important media organisation. The newspaper was once owned by Rupert Murdoch, when Hong Kong was a British colony prior to the 1997 handover. Now it's owned by China's richest man, Jack Ma, a member of the Chinese Communist Party. That association has led some to question the editorial independence of the city's most prestigious newspaper.
I mean, this is an understandable perception, and it's so commonplace that everyone just assumes that anything we do over here, it must be in keeping with Jack Ma, our own executive. Jack Ma is not hands-on with his newspaper. He loves the newspaper. He loves what we're doing. I've never heard any criticism from him about the work that we're doing. He's happy with what we're doing, and he gives us complete editorial freedom, and that's a fact.
No matter who they're reporting for, being a journalist on the front line is increasingly difficult.
I've had two reporters of the four of us hospitalized in as many weeks with a face full of pepper spray, or affected by tear spray from water cannons. I've been pressed against the wall by cops. Each day we're going to work carrying our safety gear, which just become normalized now after 15 odd weeks of protest.
And with emotions running high, staying objective is getting harder.
It's the fact that this movement is all pervasive, okay? It's everywhere. The person who serves you coffee, the person who serves you at your hotel, the bellboy, whatever it is. It's perfectly understandable for young, idealistic people in the city, including our reporters, to have sympathy for the protest movement.
With major protests expected around celebrations for the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, the violence in Hong Kong's streets will likely rage on. Competing narratives over the unrest have exposed the divide between Beijing and Hong Kong over the role of media in society, and the difficulty China will have in keeping its promise of one country, two systems.